Thanks very much, Sue, and really good to be here and exciting to be partnering with IIRSM to deliver a range of training in the area of mental wellbeing at work. This is topical as well, as you probably are aware that last week was Mental Health Awareness Week, and obviously mental health forms a big part of wellbeing within businesses. The last few years has definitely also made us realise that we can't take our mental health for granted, and it is equally as important as our physical health. So I will just do a brief introduction to myself and then we can move into the content. So as Sue said, I'm Lisa and I run an organisation, Illuminate. We're based in Warwickshire and we're workplace wellbeing specialists. So I suppose this comes from both personal and professional experience really, but what our key mission is to create phenomenal places to work, places where people can thrive. Obviously we spend so much time at work, so if it's not the right job fit, it's going to have an impact on us in terms of our mental health, our productivity, our engagement levels, and actually having a strong sense of purpose is so vital for positive mental health. So we offer a range of services that are very practical, evidence-based, and that includes delivering wellbeing diagnostics or surveys and audits to really establish what's going on in the company and where some of the development areas might be. We help to create and develop wellbeing strategies for companies, a range of specialist training and coaching support for managers and all levels within the organisation. And we also offer vocational rehabilitation and occ health support that's a little bit more reactive for individuals who are struggling and maybe want to get back on track or need to get back into work. So that experience working with a number of different organisations and helping HR and managers to support people has, I suppose, made me even more passionate about this topic and wanting to kind of educate and just ensure that companies know what is, because it is a little bit of it, or can be a bit of a minefield. There is more awareness being raised now, which is absolutely fantastic. But I do still feel that we're in a situation where we're talking about it more, but we're still unsure what to do. And that's understandable because it is quite a complex area. And it can be hard to know whether what you're doing as a company actually will have a meaningful impact. So today we're going to be just talking through how our mental health is, so kind of taking a step back and thinking about the current situation and what the impact is on businesses. Understanding how a wellbeing strategy can help, whether that is the right sort of step that you need to take as a company, and what that can look like. We're going to explore barriers that we might face in implementing support or having a strategy in place. Consider what's working well and what extra support you might need as an organisation. Thinking about who might be at risk. Obviously, you know, within the field, we're delivering to possibly a lot of risk specialists, people within health and safety. And COVID definitely brought a huge risk for organisations for our mental health and for our psychological safety. So workplaces are having to ensure they don't exacerbate any of those stress levels, or add to anxiety through some of their processes and policies they have in place. And you could probably here tell me a lot more about risk, but we know that mental ill health is a huge risk. So exploring that is really important. And then we will finish at about 1:45 and leave some time to answer your questions. If we don't have time, I'm happy to then come back to people afterwards as well. So I think it is really important to consider the business case when we think about this topic. We know supporting wellbeing is the right thing to do. I do it from that sort of human point of view, but we do often need to look at data and evidence so that we can justify investing in this topic. So this is a sort of quite a simple infographic just to illustrate the benefits of promoting better mental health or well-being within your organisations. And then we'll just look at a bit of research that backs this up. So looking at that, I just like you all to just individually reflect on any of these areas that might be positives or perhaps concerns within your organisations. So sickness absence, where are you at with that? Are there concerns over maybe multiple persistent absences or long-term absences? Staff turnover, are we seeing more people leaving? Is retention an issue? Increased employee engagement through putting in place support. So where is your engagement? How do you know how engaged people are? And productivity is definitely impacted. So are people doing what's expected of them? And we know the outcomes really of having a good wellbeing strategy in place are cost saving, but also having a stronger employer brand, so attracting people. It goes a long way nowadays if you do show that you have thought about wellbeing and you've got some plans and some support interventions in place within the company. And I think actually we've been having the conversation around wellbeing with companies long before the pandemic. But as a country, we've developed habits and working cultures that aren't necessarily conducive to sustaining high wellbeing and performance. So there was a business case pre-pandemic, but now we are at higher risk of burnout, working longer hours, blurred lines between home and work. You may be able to relate to a few of these. And so, there's also a lot of kind of unsettling stuff going on in the news. There's a lot of uncertainty. So all of these things are placing a lot of pressure on us. So I just wanted to touch on this report. You may be aware of it now because it came out in 2017, the Thriving at Work report by Stevenson and Farmer. And it's been a long time coming for this to kind of go to Parliament, and it's still in the process of they're kind of working through these 6 core standards on there, and hopefully it will get to a point where organisations will be encouraged to evidence what they're doing around these 6 areas. So you can go online and download this report, and it's got some really useful almost guidelines around how you can fulfill each of these 6 core standards. So it's a good way of benchmarking yourself actually and looking at what you're doing well and where you could improve. So yeah, they're quite sort of self-explanatory areas, and we have used these along with our experience working with companies to establish a process for wellbeing strategy. So we're going to look a little bit at some of the research now. So Deloitte, this was probably one of the widest scale research projects that was done looking at the impact of investing in mental health interventions on businesses. It's a hard thing to measure. It can be tricky for companies to really know what the impact is of what they're putting in place. So this was a study that was first done pre-pandemic. They updated again in January 2020, and then they have also released some new results in April this year. So we know the impact post-pandemic. That's probably quite small. You can access these Deloitte study results online as well. But this is just looking at some of the issues that were causing mental health problems at work. And some of the most common causes are around pressure, workload, and understandably, but also people not feeling supported. And I guess this really emphasises it's not just about the volume of work, but how well someone feels supported in managing that volume of work. And sometimes it's unavoidable. The pressures are part of the industry you're in, and there might be small things you can do, but actually if people feel that there is a safe environment, one where they are valued and where they have input, then actually managing that level of pressure is easier. So some headline results from their study, and this was on over 3,600 individuals. So our wellbeing is significantly poorer than pre-pandemic, and actually for some of for younger people, carers and minority groups, that is even more of an issue. It's become more of an issue for some of those groups. Presenteeism, so those in work but not performing because they may be unwell, and leaveism, so people not taking annual leave when it's needed, are becoming an increasing problem. Turnover, one of the biggest costs to employers, and short-term contracts obviously create uncertainty, so that's a big problem in terms of mental health. over half of people don't feel supported by their employer, which is worrying, because actually we've seen an increase in the number of things that companies are doing to support people, but yet people are increasingly not feeling supported. So there's a bit of a disconnect there between what companies think people want and need and what they do need. So a bit of communication is important there. But we have seen an increase in awareness and a prioritisation of our wellbeing. We're all more aware of our own mental health, and we might be putting in place things that help us. We are more willing to look at self-help, so looking at how we manage our time, looking at techniques such as breathing techniques, mindfulness, and using apps. So there are more and more companies now using or promoting the use of apps like Headspace and things that can really monitor our well-being. So there are some positives. We've just got a little way to go. So cost of mental health issues, you can just see, I know that's quite small again, but on the left you've got 2019 pre-pandemic. On the right you've got 2020 to 2021. They're the most up-to-date figures we've got at the moment on this, but you can see presenteeism and absenteeism haven't really changed that much. Absence has actually dropped, but staff turnover has massively increased. So we're losing people. People are making different life choices based on the pandemic. They might be leaving industries that aren't right for them, and they are actually a little more picky. We may have seen that, you know, actually, if this job is not going to suit my lifestyle, I don't want it. And so I think that one of the stats, 65% of those who plan to leave or have left say it was driven due to their poor mental health. So that may not have even been the employer that was, you know, causing that, but it's something that people are really considering now, whether the employer can help their mental health. And again, this kind of emphasises that with employee expectations. So 31% do expect more support for their mental health now, and around 50% still expect the same amount of support. So it's really just emphasising the case. So one other thing that the Deloitte study did was really look at the return on investment, and this is the important part really. This is the outcomes of that study. The fact that actually reactive support, so the stuff that's more, okay, someone is unwell, they've come to me for help, and so I'm going to refer them to an employee assistance program or for counselling, or maybe for occupational health within our company. That has been found to bring 3 to 1. So for every pound invested, £3 is returned on that, which is good. You know, it is good. But as you can see, the more proactive or company-wide interventions bring more return on investment. And that makes sense. It does make sense. It may mean a little bit more investment up front on awareness raising, on really educating managers on spotting signs early, on helping individuals to build their own resilience. But once you have done that, you will reap the rewards from it really. And company-wide awareness raising is even better. But that's obviously not going to be possible for all companies, dependent on your size. But I think the reassuring thing here is that, and we've worked with some, very, very small companies of 10 employees up to larger ones, there's always things that we can do. And actually, if we understand what our team want and what they need, and maybe have just someone who is external just looking at that, then we can put things in place that might not actually cost anything. They might just take a little bit of time to set up. Okay. So that was a little bit on the return on investment. In terms of what goes wrong, so this was a bit of research that was done through Mind Gym. They're a company of occupational psychologists, similar to my background, and they identified some of the things that can often go wrong. So companies, very good intentions, may put things in place, and actually then they looked at what would work more effectively. So I'm just going to quickly run through those now. Okay. So the first one is abandonment. So sometimes a company will place all of the responsibility on an individual to look after their well-being and doesn't really view it as their responsibility. And as we go through these, just consider which you can relate to currently where you work. Coddling, so an organisation that caters to every request. So maybe, you know, someone isn't performing or someone is struggling in their role because of their mental health, so the issues aren't addressed. People don't want to make it worse, so it's not addressed, or they're doing too much to support, which ultimately isn't helping the company or the person. Toxic positivity, I don't know if you've come across that term before, but actually we're overdoing the positive. You know, we can't say anything negative. We completely overlook anyone who raises an issue around their feelings, really, and it's no, we have to stay positive outlook. So yeah, we completely sort of deny any one of those feelings that may be really impacting them. Once and done, so the classic tick box. So doing occasional disjointed activities or doing one-offs because we know it's important, but actually there's no follow-up to that. And then offering perks and diversions. So again, very well intended most of the time, but certain benefits such as free fruit Friday, and I'm not denying that that's a good thing, you know, it's good to have that, a yoga class, a mindfulness webinar, something that again maybe isn't connected to what people definitely want and isn't ongoing. So how do we get that right? I think that's the important part, really. And you know, it's natural to do some of these things. I guess what we're not saying here is that it's completely unavoidable, but if we're aware of some of the things we might be doing wrong or could do better, then we can make positive changes. So in terms of getting those things right, what we can do here is just ensure that there is a joint responsibility from the organisation and individuals. So we're in this together. So we appreciate that actually as an individual, they have to take a step to want to help themselves. And we cannot ultimately determine how someone manages their mental health. But as a company, we do accept that if we provide an unsafe environment, one that places some people at high risk of stress and doesn't go any way to help them manage that, then we're going to be negatively impacting their mental health. So we both play a part. Adult to adult, so as opposed to coddling, you know, having adult conversations with people, recognizing actually when someone's performance might be impacting them. So we have the confidence and the tools to have those conversations with somebody openly, in a supportive way, so that we can help them kind of get back on track. Also talking about their family life, their capacity, ensuring that we're doing that very openly, so there aren't any surprises for somebody who suddenly is going down a performance management route, where it's never been, you know, addressed before. Being emotionally agile, so this was the sort of the way of managing that toxic positivity. So we can speak about how we feel, and we want people to feel safe to do that, but we approach it in a mindful, productive way. So if we do, you know, share that something isn't working for us, we are listened to, but then we do talk about solutions and we look at what we can do about that. Doing things little and often rather than sort of tick box. So looking at what people may need, looking at what some of the issues are, and ensuring that there's then regular small scale actions that create a positive climate. And that climate of wellbeing, so equipping your leaders and your managers with the right tools to build a positive environment for people. So some of this may seem quite common sense, but I think it's important to sometimes remind ourselves of what we can be doing, and to again kind of look at your own company and benchmark. So I just wanted to actually just find out from you all where you're at in terms of wellbeing strategy. So I'm just going to pause. There may be a little lag here. Just pause the slideshow for a second. and hopefully on the screen in a moment. And Sue, I'm sure you'll tell me if this doesn't come up. But there should be a page with www.menti.com at the top that you are able to see now. And so if you either on your phone or you can open in a new browser on your computer, if you type in www.menti.com, it will ask you for a code. And if you type in 88414088, you can vote on that question. So does your organisation have a wellbeing strategy? And it's good to see that it's working. So where are you at with it? Just be interesting to see. And it is anonymous, I should add. I'll leave it on there for a moment because it may just take people a little bit of fiddling about. As I said, you can use your mobile phone if it's easier than opening a new page. So pre-pandemic, I think the stats on this were that it was less than a third of organisations had a wellbeing strategy in place. Whereas now we're looking at, I think post-pandemic, it is over 50%. So that is a positive as well. There is that recognition that putting this in place or having a strategy is going to be useful. So I can see that there's still some coming in, but don't worry if it's not working easily. Just reflect for yourself. Where are you on this? So no one's got it completely sorted. I'm glad no one's put that, because any strategy needs reviews. It needs to be constantly looked at, or at regular intervals. So a few people say it needs some work, but it is in place. There's 3 where it's on the to-do list. And no one's saying they don't think we need one. We usually have the odd person coming in saying that, and I'm not here to actually argue that. I think we are all from very different companies and you operate in different ways. So I'd just be really interested to hear what alternatives there are, if that is where you're at. Okay. We'll come back to in a moment, actually. So that web page open. And I'll continue sharing. So we were talking a little bit around what we can do to get it right. Barriers. What barriers do we face when it comes to supporting wellbeing at work? I thought there was another slide in there. There isn't. So actually, I will. Apologies for the tech here. It was a smoother transition. If you go back to the Menti poll, the next question is around what barriers you might face. So I want you to think of this. Hopefully that's come up on there, and you can try and sort of be concise with it with a few words. But what might stop you supporting wellbeing at work? What might stop you implementing a strategy? And then we'll see what you come up with, and then I'll run through, I suppose, some of the most common barriers that we see around this. So I'm hoping this is working. And it may be that there are no barriers at all. For some reason, I can't view them. Here they are, they're coming up. Excellent. Getting buy-in, commitment, workload. Yeah. Common barriers. And getting buy-in, I mean, I don't know who we've got present here, but this might come up as a question later from one of you. And so that's similar with senior management. Getting buy-in, that's one of the biggest barriers that I hear. And I quite often work with senior leadership teams around this. It's often seen as a nice to have with wellbeing, but I think if you can, if it's something you're quite passionate about, if you can present it the language of those on that senior leadership team, directors, so that they really see how it kind of impacts them and impacts their business. I think if you go to somebody with loads of stats and that's just not how they work, they might just think, why? Yeah, okay, I get that, but how is that actually relevant to me? Whereas I suppose if you're really talking to them about you know, the values of the company. They might have set the values and the mission and how wellbeing is going to drive that business forward, how it's going to really, you know, help growth, how it's getting, whatever their mission might be, how is it going to help them achieve that, then that's going to be more important and more meaningful to somebody. Also, if you can really get somebody who is at a senior level to relate to this, you know, we think now about the impact on our mental health. I don't know anyone who hasn't seen heightened stress levels, hasn't had a level of anxiety, hasn't had a close family member affected by this, a child. And so actually, if somebody who is at senior level can share that to a point, it's very, very powerful. So we know some of our clients actually last week for Mental Health Awareness Week, you know, shared their story around how they've been impacted by mental ill health and what they've done to sort of help them, and they've shared that with the whole company. So that can really help. The commitment to it, yeah, it's sad when we organization and we have great momentum at the beginning, but then actually keeping that going really difficult because there isn't necessarily a dedicated person. You've got a lot of other tasks to do and responsibilities. So with that, I think if you're going to set anything like this up, it's good to maybe have a wellbeing working group or have very clearly defined responsibilities. So if you're HR, it might be that you do, you know, a review every fortnight on a specific thing and you factor in time for that. It might be that your health and safety and there's an element. You might be a wellbeing champion and you do communications with the company. But I think just really, you know, allocating the time and clearly defining it is very important. We've got remote working there, yeah. So a barrier to being able to identify issues, but also then talk about them and address them if people are not physically in the same space. And that is tricky. And I think it does take an element of getting people together more often if they're comfortable, in order to build trust and teams that can talk more openly about this. But upskilling managers can help there too. A lack of interest, yeah. And actually there may be other business priorities so that do need focus at that time. I think what we've definitely found though is that having something in place, even if it is a very top level strategy or commitment to your people around mental health, is more, you know, is better, I suppose, more beneficial than doing absolutely nothing because the timing was not right. So it shows people that you are invested in them, they care about it, or you care about it, they see that you take it seriously. So even if all you do is, you know, speak about mental health on Mental Health Awareness Week and then ensure that in team meetings there's, you know, open discussion encouraged, or in one-to-ones it's mentioned, that could be part of your strategy for now, rather than doing nothing for the perfect time, because they may not affect time. Freelancers has come up as a bit of a barrier. So again, yeah, people working in different contracts and potentially not there on a full-time basis. So how do you factor in how you support people differently? But yeah, happy to answer any questions if I've misunderstood that at the end. And we've got workload, yeah, so time's an issue. People being reactive, not proactive. Yeah, reactive is better than nothing. I think that it's important to explore though what we mean by proactive, perhaps. So thank you very much for doing that. That was really useful. It's always good to kind of see what is going on and what is still you know, causing a barrier for organizations. Okay. So how can having a wellbeing strategy help? So the simply act of having some form of plan and communicating that to people, even if it is actually right now the business priorities are X, Y, Z. Wellbeing is very important. So what we're going to do is just ensure these small things happen is better. People feel more valued, and I think it's, you know, it's something at the moment that because we are so aware of mental health, if a company does nothing, it's almost like it is being totally ignored. Equally, doing too much when it's not been thought out, as you said previously, not be well received, and people may not feel it's genuine. So some of the ways that having a strategy can help. It does provide a clear framework to follow. So rather than, I suppose, doing the one-off things, you've got a plan in place. And we're going to show you our process in a moment, and you can maybe adapt that whether you use your own one, but having that clear framework is a key to success. So having a process of objectives and actions takes the stress away from you or others and places it in the process. And you could start small with a broad overview and then add in details maybe as you increase budget and time. Interestingly, no one put budget actually on the barriers, because that often comes up. It allows you to analyse data to inform your initiatives. So having a strategy means you could take a deeper dive into your business and fully understand what people are thinking. So whether that's doing a survey, doing anonymous polls, doing feedback sessions, listening groups, those sorts of things. So that it means that your initiatives are more impactful, and you will be able to gain buy-in by really demonstrating what the situation is, what people need, and what you can do about it. It ensures you meet the needs of your people, because it's what they really do want and need, and as I said, helps gain buy-in, and it does bring about that return on investment. So we can only really measure whether something's been successful if we really understand kind of why we're doing it, and we've thought through what those measures are going to be. So a lot of the information that we are touching on here, we go into a lot more detail on in our workshop that's taking place in June, and I'll just make sure I meet at the end. So this is the framework that we use and we'll talk through during that workshop. Necessarily the only framework, but this is based on our experiences with companies, but also our kind of knowledge from taking place in sort of management courses, looking at evidence-based theories around resilience, mental health in companies, and learning from people really. So the first one is around making your commitment to wellbeing, and that is often what we do, is working with the senior leadership teams. Surprising how when you actually, if you can get them in the room together, how interesting this topic is for people, because we're all impacted by it. So how would you define wellbeing within the company? What problems are you trying to fix or prevent? Looking at how wellbeing fits in with the company vision and values. And actually, if you can use then the language of senior people and kind of cascade that down, then it's more meaningful. And number 2 is planning and launching the strategy. So really understanding who your workforce are, the demographics of it, how they work, are they remote? And it does need to speak to people. So really thinking, what data do you already have? Do you know about absence levels? Do we know about productivity? Have we done an engagement survey previously? What about exit interviews and understanding why people are leaving? And this is also about gathering your budget and how you're going to communicate it to people. The third part is providing good working conditions, and this we really explore the ISO 45003. So I'm not sure, how to say that in a shorter way, but that new ISO standard is really looking at, I suppose, risks, and there is a bit of a checklist that you can use within your organisation to kind of assess how you are putting things in place to really minimise stress for individuals. So this is the really proactive stuff, which is often thought about right at the end of the process, but actually with an audit we can really look at what you've already got in place in terms of processes and policies, where these things might need to be reviewed, so that actually you've got the working conditions right. You're reducing risk factors of stress, which in itself is going to improve wellbeing. So that has to form part of that strategy. The fourth part is training, and you may not need to deliver any training. So quite often things like mental health first aid are thought of as the go-to, the first thing to do within a company when it comes to wellbeing. And we deliver that training. I think it is a fantastic course, especially the new one, the updated version. but it's not always the right thing to do. And I think it very much depends on your company, your needs, your people, and whether it's actually going to be utilised. So training, considering where there might be skill gaps. Are your leaders confident? Because I think a lot of it does come down to them being well themselves and then leading by example. Is there anyone in-house who can deliver, or do you need to outsource it? And then number 5 is support, so offering the right support. And we often work to a 3-tier approach. So preventative measures, so that's around maintaining positive wellbeing through webinars and workshops, maybe interactive tools and sharing of best practice. You've then got your proactive support, so things like your employee assistance programs, line managers, one-to-ones, peer-to-peer support, mental health first aiders. And then you've got your reactive supports such as occupational health, counselling, those sorts of things, reasonable adjustments. And the final part of the process is monitoring and evaluating. So just ensuring that you are reviewing things regularly and you're using a variety to capture that data. That could be surveys, focus groups, meetings. And so, yeah, you ensure that you are constantly reviewing it. So a question for you to just consider really, what is currently working well in your company to support the wellbeing of staff, of your people? And if you are starting to plan a strategy, or you're trying to gather information to do that, it sounds very obvious to think, well, what have we already got in place? But I've gone into quite a few companies and there's lots of amazing things they're doing, but they're not communicating it very well. I'll never forget going to deliver some training for quite a large company, and I asked them if they had an employee assistance program, and they said, no, don't know what that is. And I went to the toilet, and on the back of the toilet door, it was advertising their employee assistance program. That was just poor communication. It hadn't been promoted. And so this amazing resource they had was not being utilised. So what's already working that you actually need to make more of and actually really show people you've got it there? And who are your most at-risk groups within the company? So, for you, is it remote workers, people who work out on the field on their own? Is it potentially the younger generation who are coming in to the company and haven't had the work experience, and their knowledge isn't quite there yet? Are there certain minority groups? Carers was one we mentioned earlier as well. So important to just to be mindful of that. And I always like to put this in because we're talking here about ensuring that the company is supporting wellbeing, but no matter what your job role is, it's so important that it does start with you. And so you're here today, you must have a level of interest in wellbeing, or you've been advised to come on it to learn more. So your own wellbeing is a priority, and self-care is not selfish. I think we do need to give ourselves permission more to prioritize our well-being, and that might be just by doing little things like setting time for a break in your calendar each day so you can get outside for a walk. It could be ensuring that we actually put self-care on our to-do list. So I'm going to go to the gym this week, or I'm going to go and see this friend. I'm going to give myself an hour to unwind after work, whatever it might be. Be kind to yourself. So I've worked with a lot of individuals within HR who become quite overwhelmed by this whole process of trying to support wellbeing. They're reading more and more stuff, they're looking at more stats. I've added to it today with stats, but they're just getting more overwhelmed and then beating themselves up for having not progressed it. We might have a follow-up meeting with them, they're like, Lisa, we haven't done anything. And there's a lot going on. So whatever can help you make that simpler, be kind to yourselves, set very little goals to progress, and make sure you're not doing it on your own. Also set yourself clear boundaries around switching off, and how much information you actually access through phones and technology. Ask for help when needed and lead by example. So, healthy habits you do day to day will be seen by other people. And that's incredibly powerful. I suppose don't underestimate the impact of that. If someone in your team sees you taking a lunch break or leaving on time because you've got something you want to do, we can't always do it, but when we do, it goes a long way. So the upcoming workshops, on Tuesday the 13th of June, there's a 3-hour workshop on developing an effective wellbeing strategy. So held online, and I'm sure Sue will be posting information about how to book. On the 27th of June, there's a longer workshop around embedding staff wellbeing, and that is designed for anyone who is responsible for wellbeing in more of a kind of leadership managerial role or HR. But it's around the kind of practical ways you can support somebody within your team. So for more information from us, you can visit our website or email me, and I'd love to hear your questions. So I'll invite questions now. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa, for a really interesting and informative session. We do have some questions. The first one is somebody who's in a managerial role and has somebody on their team who isn't coping with the demands of the job, but whenever they're approached to have a discussion about it, is really unwilling to have a discussion about how they're coping or not coping. And the person is asking you, how do you actually go about initiating that conversation, which can be quite difficult?
Yeah, it can. And I suppose we can never force someone to talk, can we? So we can do all we can to create the right environment and ask in the right sensitive way, but someone has to be ready themselves. I think you said that person's in a managerial position. Yes, yeah. So also that, yeah, I suppose that they are in a position where they're also supporting others. I think it's important to not give up on this, because and be really clear on what it is you've seen or noticed that has indicated to you that they're not well. So is it just they just don't see themselves, and they're quieter? Are there things at work they're doing that are flagging that up? So have they made an error? Have they spoken to someone in a certain way? Have they been impatient? Because then you can, rather than just the how are you sure you're okay questions, you can say, I've noticed X, Y, Z. So do you want to talk about that? You know, are you okay? I'm bringing this to your attention because I am concerned. But you've got a reason, and I think it's harder for someone to ignore that you've noticed that. I could probably say more. I'm just sort of thinking, yeah, I don't know whether that's helped as an opener, but
yeah, finding a way into that conversation that isn't sort of too demanding of the other person.
Yes, yeah, and I think I would do it informally as well, and if you can find an opportune moment where it's not a meeting, so it's, oh, let's just grab, you know, if you are physically together, let's just go for a walk. If you're not, maybe just a message on Teams or a bit of a chat, you know, oh yeah, like let's have a catch up, just something that's not as daunting. But don't be afraid to say, I am concerned about you, because then someone really does know that there's something there, and they may go away and reflect on it. So in the moment we can often be defensive, but then when we think about it, we might be like, oh, actually I have been a bit snappy, or okay, yeah, I'm not quite right. And they can then think about what level of info they give you. You could also just reassure them that they don't need to tell you everything, but is there anything that you know they think you should know to help them at work?
Lovely, thank you. That's really helpful advice. We've got a couple of questions to do with mental health first aiders. So first question, they're both linked. First question is, you know, how do they fit into your overall strategy for wellbeing, and how do you use them successfully?
Oh, big questions, but yeah, good ones. There's still ongoing research with mental health first aid, and you may have seen out there that there's mixed evidence that, you know, some studies saying it's very, very useful, others saying it doesn't have the desired effect. So I think the first question is, what do you want it to achieve? So a mental health first aider, if they are just doing that as a role, as the 2-day course, you know, will give them that qualification to do, they are there to kind of advocate for positive mental health, to be a listening ear for people, but not a counsellor, and to be able to, I suppose, reach out to people who they've spotted signs of being unwell with and have those conversations. But I suppose that they're not necessarily going to be a wellbeing champion. Someone who is championing it and actually influencing it would probably need extra training. So I suppose, yeah, the question is, what do you want it to achieve? Because it has been found to really raise awareness of mental ill health. And for those who do the training, their mental health has improved massively. So it's a very good course. It just doesn't necessarily have huge impacts for your company if it's done on its own. I think another consideration to make is how open as a company you are already. So we've delivered training where it's been really effective because they already had the culture where people would go to their manager. This training just kind of gave people a bit more kind of authority around it and confidence, and it meant that the people who were already good listeners, you know, could be promoted as these mental health first aiders. Where we've delivered it in a company where ongoing reviews or support, managers didn't see it as actually their responsibility to check in on people, they weren't used much. There's one gaming company where we delivered the training, and after the first year we reviewed it and people had not been used at all. My question to them was, but have the mental health first aiders been having more conversations anyway? Because it doesn't have to be a formal, someone gives you a ring. But that was to do with how they communicated it. So they hadn't communicated it very well. The mental health first aiders didn't really feel that they could approach people. So yeah, I think your culture plays a big part in it.
Okay, thank you. And so a subsidiary question to that is, what training would you recommend for a wellbeing champion on top of the mental health first aider?
I think not necessarily anything formal. I don't think it'd be like having a qualification. I think it would have to depend on their role, because if you're wanting someone to take time out of their day a week to do this, then I suppose it has to be part of their role. So giving them time for that, and then potentially doing something just in-house, maybe with an external person coming in, where you're looking at what their strategy is and you're giving them some guidance on how to do that. So I think something that's less formalized, perhaps, and it may be, I mean, there's a lot of kind of online stuff out there, so it might be that you give them time to educate and build their knowledge as well, or sort of support groups through HR, CIPD, things like that.
Okay, that's great advice, thank you. Next question is all about who should be owning the wellbeing strategy. Is it HR, occupational health? Where does it sit within an organisation?
I don't know if there is a set answer for that really, because I think it just depends on who's going to drive it forward. So it usually isn't someone at the top of the organisation, but they might sit in to review it at the yearly at a senior leadership team meeting. But I've seen HR people do it. I've seen health and safety actually take ownership, because they are looking at stress and risk factors of stress, and that falls under them. I think you've got to be quite motivated to want to do it. So if you're in HR and actually this is just something you do not have time for, given your role and the way your company works, then is someone else better doing it? We've also, sometimes it's better to have, we found it's better to have a steering group. So there's maybe 3 individuals who own it, but then where we've worked with a company, we're almost like their external wellbeing business partner, if you like. So we might have a monthly review with them where we just go through where have they got to, what's the next step. It might just be half an hour, so to keep them on track. But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but we're seeing it more with health and safety.
Okay, so it's really looking at the individual's organisation and where it best fits with the right people.
Yeah. Who's got the willingness and the time.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Good, great advice again. So I'm sure this next question will resonate. This person is saying that everything they've tried to put in place to support well-being is hardly ever taken up, and yet employees are still complaining we're not doing enough. So how do we get the balance right?
Yeah, it's so hard, isn't it? And frustrating for you if that's what you're doing. And I know, and you're really wanting to help people. So I don't know what you've already done, whether you have opened that up and asked people what they want. But there is an accountancy firm I'm working with where they've done that, and then people don't give them any feedback. So yeah, it's very, very difficult. But I think in that case, maybe I would take a step back from delivering, because you don't want to invest in things that people don't seem to be wanting. Maybe put a bit more ownership on individuals. So one idea that this client had was they've got a few different offices. They've also got people remotely, but they've almost asked for volunteers for each area to and gave a little budget as just a bit of a trial, really, and just said, for this next quarter, that you've got this budget, we want you to talk to people, find out what they want to do, what's going to help well-being, and gave them a bit of a framework around how they could do that. And they're going to see what happened, and that's all with their peers, I suppose. And so that's what some of it is. But I think it may come back to, even if, because people don't always want webinars, but if there's something causing them stress, it's workload, the environment they're in, then no matter what you do, I suppose, they might not feel like wellbeing's being looked after. So maybe just review managers and how well they're supporting their teams and how regularly they're talking to them, because that's a big, we often leave a job because of our manager, don't we?
Yeah.
Sadly. But also look at whether you can do a kind of wide scale stress risk assessment or something on the company, and look at indicators of workplace stress. Might be an idea.
Okay, another great answer. So hopefully that person can take some of those ideas back in and try and get their wellbeing strategy back on board, which is great. Next question then is all about the areas that an organisation should focus on within the strategy. They've started to really sort of put together some ideas, and they're looking at sort of financial, social, physical and psychological well-being. Is there anything else they need to be thinking about?
This is like, I actually did start up doing a sort of pillars of well-being, and I think they were the three that I would always come back to as fundamentals were financial, physical and psychological, and I suppose social falls under psychological. You could keep going, and environmental and building to it. I think that's got to be for you to decide in your company and what people can relate to. So I think keeping it simple is important, but you may just, within physical, financial, psychological, then just sort of have a few other levels within each of those. But it sounds like you've considered the
That's good, thank you. And then there's somebody here that's wondering about how important it is within any sort of wellbeing strategy to have people involved that have lived experience of some of the issues. Is that something that you would sort of encourage?
Yes, I think so, yeah. And not necessarily the people who are driving it, but if you have got someone who's in a position where they've got lived experience, then I think brilliant. That's even better, isn't it? But involving people, so whether that's that you have a kind of mental health working group, so people do explore things in there, and then they feed that up to the ones who are driving the strategy, or asking for volunteers who might want to share stories on particular weeks, or if you've got something planned. I think that's it's always a really useful thing to do, actually, and I think at all levels. So when I mentioned earlier, it's really good at senior level for someone to share their story, because people think, oh wow, they're doing all this and they've also got anxiety, and that, I can relate to that. But I think it also is important to be at all levels in the company, so people can relate to it. So I think, yes, short answer, yes, I think that's important, but I wouldn't say everybody in the sort of steering group needs to have personal lived experience.
Okay, that's lovely, thank you very much. I think those are all the questions we've had come through, so some great questions there. Just checking. Yes, that's all of the questions answered. Thank you ever so much. So we'll leave it there for today, Lisa. Thanks again for sharing your knowledge for us and giving us some fantastic answers to those questions. Thank you to everybody that's joined us this afternoon. The recording will be on the RRSM Resource Hub later today, so you'll be able to catch up or recap on anything in your own time. I will send you all an email with further details of the 2 workshops that Lisa is kindly presenting for us. So I'll get those off to in an email to you later this afternoon. So we'll be ending the webinar here. Thank you everybody for joining us, and have a good rest of your day. Thanks a lot. See you again. Bye bye.